Sleeman, who looks similar to me. I'm a different guy. I'm a different league. So Mike and I will be talking about what's coming up in a couple of weeks at Google I/O. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about what's on the schedule. We're going to try to help you guys filter out some of the important information. There's 178 sessions, so it's just complete information overload. We'll talk a little bit about some of the predictions that we think will come out of it based on the schedule and some rumors and press leaks. And we're going to really focus on these tracks. I'll talk about Android, ML, and AR, and Mike's going to take care of the rest. Oh, by the way, the Google I/O website has a really good kind of, this is a screenshot from the Google I/O website. It's really easy to filter on different tracks and different topics, so I recommend to get in there and use those tools to figure out what you want to view. So let's just take a moment to kind of have a look at what's come out of Google I/O in the last couple of years. So 2017, we got official support for Kotlin. We got the introduction of Android architecture components with live data, room, and view model. 2018, they announced Jetpack, navigation library, Work Manager, AR Core, RoboElectric 4.0, and ML Kit. So you really can't understate the impact of some of the announcements that come out of Google I/O and how they affect us as Android developers. I personally use or have used pretty much everything on this slide. So expect stuff to come out next month that will kind of impact your day-to-day work. 61 Android sessions, 22 ML sessions, 6 AR sessions. It's a lot of information. What I recommend you do is maybe ask your employer for a half day to view 3 or 4 of the talks. That's how we kind of approach it. We get the team together and we kind of pick the highest impact talks to start with. And then from there, that kind of gets the juices flowing and we can kind of watch some more talks during the following weeks. So here's some of the highlights for me. These are the 4 classics. So you've got the Google keynote, which opens up the conference. It's 3 hours long. It's very consumer focused. A lot of marketing speak. I was there in 2017 and I sat through the whole thing. But every other year, I'll just watch the 10-minute summary on YouTube. I highly recommend that. Up next is the developer keynote. It's a great overview, but very high level. I find it's really good for kind of helping guide me in what I view throughout the rest of the conference. Also, there'll be a lot of announcements during those 2 keynotes, and they will inevitably add some more talks to the schedule based on those announcements. So what's new in Android? Pretty much they're going to talk about some more details around what's happening in Android Q. And one of my favorite talks each year is what's new in Android development tools. So this is the stuff that has changed in Android Studio that can potentially make our day-to-day dev tasks easier. So if you only watched two sessions during Google I/O, I'd probably recommend those last 2 there, what's new in Android and what's new in Android development tools. So I'm super interested in architecture and testing, and these are 4 of the sessions that jumped out for me. The big one is, this is the only session on testing throughout the whole conference, which surprised me a little bit. But they're going to talk about the latest Android X test libraries and tools. Last year, we were introduced to the concept of RoboElectric 4.0 and this idea of running our UI tests, our espresso tests, as headless tests in the JVM, kind of like unit tests. So we're not quite there yet with that, so I'm hoping they give us some more information or some more announcements around that functionality. I love the architecture components suite, so I'm super interested in what's going to be announced there. Someone mentioned at one point that it might make sense for Google to add a dependency injection component, which I thought also made sense. Architecture components are really geared around addressing pain points for Android developers, and I think dependency injection kind of falls into that category. So we'll see what comes out of that. So I use the navigation component, and it's pretty cool, but a lot has changed since 1.0, and there's a few nuances there. So this talk will talk about what's changed there. There's a talk on modular app architecture, and it looked interesting because it's going to talk about how different use cases, different apps like games versus banking apps, how that might dictate what architecture you use to build your app. So Android UI and productivity. This is a talk that looks like it'd be a lot of value. Android Studio tips and tricks, how to get the most out of your IDE. What's new in Android Studio, UI design and debugging tools. So the description says something about some new tools for building layouts and debugging views at runtime. So there's going to be some new announcements around out-of-app experiences as well, Bubble API and sharing shortcuts. So I don't know what they are, but it'll be interesting to see how they relate to the slices that were announced last year. So dedicated session on foldables. Everyone knows Samsung's about to release that, except people are getting folds in their screens, so we don't know what's happening there. But it'll be interesting to see how we should kind of prep our apps for those new displays. So constraint layout is pretty cool, but there are some common pitfalls. So I'm interested to kind of learn how I can use constraint layout a little bit better, because I do have some issues when I use it. And I think it'll also be interesting to see how you can integrate motion and basically do animations using constraint layout. And of course, we've got to do accessibility, and there's some new announcements coming out around a live transcribe feature for hard of hearing, as well as some changes to the existing accessibility suite. Okay, Kotlin and other app optimizations. So they're going to kind of summarize where Kotlin's at 2 years after announcing support for it. This one looks interesting because it's going to talk about bytecode optimizations for the new D8 Dexer. So basically that means faster builds, which I think everyone is interested in. And dedicated session on coroutines. I think everyone's kind of interested in where coroutines are going. There's a new Android X concurrent library they're going to talk about, and also how to use coroutines with the existing architecture components. And yeah, a couple of sessions down the bottom there that are looking at basically reducing app size using the app bundles. Okay, so there were 5 sessions that jumped out at me on machine learning, and I'll just kind of go through these super quickly. I really like MLKit, and it looks like there's going to be some new additions to MLKit, so you'll get a good overview in the What's New session. Google Coral is this new platform. Coral? Sorry. So I think there's a bit of, everyone's a bit unsure about what that is exactly. From what I've read, it sounds like it's basically going to give you access to the TPUs to kind of accelerate the on-device model training that is starting to be done more often. So we'll see what comes out of that session. Just a big shout out to Lawrence Moroney. He is my favorite Google speaker at these events. He takes really complex concepts and breaks them down in layman's terms and terms that are pretty easy to understand. So I'll pretty much watch any session that he's in. And this looks like a good one about summarizing all the different options for on-device training and running of ML models. So yeah, if you want to dig a little bit deeper into TensorFlow, there's some more sessions to do that. And this one was interesting to me. It's talking about the kind of UX design patterns that you want to use when you're using some of those MLKit APIs. So for example, when you're doing facial recognition, what should the UX for that kind of look like? And AR. So I got stuck into AR Core when it came out last year, and it was really cool, but there were a few things missing, things like autofocus. So it'll be interesting to see what's kind of been added to AR Core since that 1.0 release. And another one I found interesting was a dedicated session on augmenting faces and images. So detecting, perceiving and then augmenting real faces with digital content. So I think Google thinks that this is going to be such a common use case that they need a dedicated session for it. I kind of agree. I think there's a lot of potential for accessibility around this kind of technology as well. So I think I'll definitely be watching that one. So what's missing? Yeah, I would have liked to see more on testing. I would have loved to see a call out for the next kind of iteration of the headless UI tests. And I'm also kind of interested in Kotlin native and these multi-platform projects. I don't know that this is a huge priority for Google, so I don't know if it's going to be added or if there's any announcements around it, but I would have liked to see a big announcement around Kotlin native. And no Jake, he's mad. Our own Maxim Lim teased some information out of him on Twitter, and he's not going to be there. The reason I mention it is he's always got quite an interesting talk in previous years. He's spoken about Kotlin the last 2 years, so a little bit disappointed that he's not there, but he's elsewhere. So as I mentioned, there'll be more talks announced during the keynote, so keep an eye out for them. So that's my section on Android stuff. I'll hand it over to Mike.
Cool, thanks Mike. Okay, bit of a change of pace. So I'm covering all of the rest. Okay. So this is an interesting talk because this is actually my anniversary. I actually gave this talk back in 2018 and it was my first presentation for GDG, and it was at WeWork, if I remember correctly. Hopefully we do not have it on video, so I don't have to look at it. But anyway, just getting back into it, this is always a hard talk to squeeze into a lightning talk. There is so much stuff. Like, it's just, you get into rumours and you go all over the place, and I don't know about Luke, but I spent forever kind of putting this together, and there's so much you could put in, so you have to pick kind of the highlights. Just quickly on devices. Devices are really important to those of us who are going because we think we might get one. So this is why I've got this slide here. So a lot of the chat in the GDG organisers groups has been about, okay, Pixel Watch. Oh my God, you break my heart every year. Pixel Watch, it's just not there. Where is it? It's just not coming. So look, there's a remote chance that maybe there's a Pixel Watch or something like that, but it's probably doubtful. The other thing that's been kicking around the traps too is Nest Hub Max. So it's a mixing of the Nest brand and the Home Hub. So they kind of mixed it together, so that's rumoured to be a 10-inch display, Nest camera, stereo speakers. Who knows if that'll make it out? That was apparently a faux pas by Google on one of their sites, which is shown there. And Google I/O is normally not about devices. Google kind of tamed down the giving away devices quite a few years ago when everyone started to go to Google I/O just to get free devices, right? So they really hosed that down. That being said, there was an announcement about May 7th, the day before Google I/O, and that's likely to be the announcement of the Pixel 3a and the 3a XL, which are mid-range versions of our wonderful devices. Rocking a Pixel 3 XL, love it. So they're probably coming out. That'll definitely probably be announced probably on the 7th. So some of the other stuff, Google Play and Google Pay. Google Play has been going a bit crazy lately. There's been lots of little features sort of squeezing out, coming out here and there. There's rumour of a translate button on the Play pages. So you've got your App Store listing up in English, you can push a button and turn it into Turkish or Spanish or whatever. That's a bit of a rumour. But there's definitely going to be other new features around Google Play. I'm always surprised at how many announcements there are around Google Play at I/O. And as a product manager, I quite like that because it's all about distribution and deployment, so I'm quite excited about those ones. Google Play billing. There's a whole bunch of generic descriptions around this. This is a bit of a surprise. I didn't know what words to put here, but who the hell knows? This is a bit of a strange one. This one's interesting. Everyone knows Mikeys are now available on your phone, right, in Google Pay? Is everyone using it every day? Yep. Yeah, we all probably signed up for the trial but didn't get on it, but now that it's live we can do it if we've got Android phones. So that's probably an extension of that. So there's a really good session there about all those other boarding pass and passes and voucher type stuff that can be in Google Pay. So that one jumped out at me as a kind of a bit of an odd session, but I'm going to go to it anyway. Firebase. This is something that's near and dear to my heart. Sticker on the front. Firebase, what can I say about Firebase? Firebase has been treading water for 6 months. If you look at their blog, it's been a lot of reposts of previous articles, a lot of talking about existing features. To be frank, I'm expecting a lot from Firebase at Google I/O because they seem to have gone quiet for quite a while. There was a bit off the back of the Firebase Summit, but not heaps. Now, for those of you who don't know, Firebase got sort of materialized out of the Fabric platform that Google bought some time ago. Now, if you go over to the roadmap for the Fabric site, you'll see there's mention of this new A/B testing and Firebase app deployment. I'm really hoping that this gets announced at Google I/O. It's due to be. It's on the roadmap for mid-2019, and we know that Fabric's going to be closed down by Google at the end of 2019. So look out for some other app distribution, probably called Firebase App Deployment, announced at Google I/O. There's some good stuff there. But as I said, expecting a lot in the Firebase space. We'll see how it goes. Also, one of the other main topics that's hitting I/O this year is games. So games is really a new topic or section for Google I/O. So there's a bit more of a focus on the Firebase products that as they relate to games. So there'll be some interesting stuff around Unity SDK and some C++ stuff in Firebase. So that'll be quite interesting. And by the way, this is the announcement on the Fabric page about Firebase app distribution. So I'm kind of believing Google that it's actually going to happen. Everything lines up, the date, everything. It should be coming out. Flutter, so this is near and dear to my heart because I run the Flutter Melbourne subgroup. The good thing about Flutter is it's open source. So because it's open source, you can go in and look at all the commits every day, every hour. You can look at them all, see what's coming. So almost definitely it's going to be Flutter 1.5 is going to come out. That's off the back of Flutter being 1.0 in December 2018, 1.2 a couple of months ago, and now it's going to be 1.5. Why the numbers skip? The numbers skip is because those other dot releases were betas, and these are the stable channel releases. Flutter's growing pretty quick. I won't go into all the stuff that's going to be in 1.5 because we can leave that for Flutter at Hack Night. I won't bore all of you who are into Android and not into Flutter. But one thing to note, Brett Morgan, who's a Google employee in Sydney, I think he previously worked on Maps, did he guys? Or he was an Android dev. He's moved over to the Flutter Dev Relations team. So if you follow Flutter, there's a core group of people that are the Flutter Dev Relations team. They're in all the videos and the Udacity training and all that sort of stuff. So Brett's now actually joined that team, and he's actually going to come here and give us a talk in Melbourne at our Google I/O Extended event on May 23rd. Fingers crossed, he's still coming. But he's actually giving the Building iOS with Flutter session at Google I/O as well. This is an interesting one. So for those of you who don't know, Flutter is for building native apps on iOS and Android, but at Google I/O, you'll notice the title of that one, Beyond Mobile, Building Flutter Apps for iOS, Android, Chrome OS, and Web. So what that means is there's new targets. So in theory, you'll be able to write potentially Flutter apps that actually run as native apps on Chromebooks and for the web. For the web, there was a previous project called Hummingbird, which I don't think it was even dev preview. It was just like a showcase. So we're expecting that to be either dev preview or semi-released or a beta or an alpha or something. So that's coming. But that's not all. If you look really closely at the repo, you'll see that there's other targets for Flutter. Things like Mac, running native apps on Macs. I think Max has run a native Flutter app on a Mac. Is that correct?
On a Chromebook.
On a Chromebook, there you go. And also Windows as a target and Linux as a target. So that's kind of a bit mind-blowing. Write a Flutter app running on Android, iOS, Mac, Windows, Chromebook, Linux, everything. Whether those three platforms are actually official targets come Google I/O, who knows? Because you notice they're not little dots at the bottom of that session, but we'll wait and see. Dart 2.3 also got released the day before last. So it's just got some nice language sugar for us to work with, which is really handy for those of us who are actually kind of coding in Dart all the time. And there's a small chance Max is a big fan of this one. He made me put it in the slide. There's a possibility that there's something about Fuchsia. So for those of you who don't know, Fuchsia is rumoured to be Android's follow-on operating system from Android forward. Now, Fuchsia is mentioned as a target in the repo for Flutter. There's an SDK, we know bits and pieces about it, but I don't think Google's said anything publicly at things like Google I/O, so we'll just have to wait and see. But it is in there as a Flutter target, so stay tuned. Google Assistant. Now, we did mention before that we're actually going to be doing a bit more of a work on Google Assistant, and there'll be actually a kind of a new subgroup forming where we do Google Assistant code labs and run-throughs. Where's Zubin? Can Zubin put up again? There's Zubin. He's going to be leading it at the next Hack Night. But looking at the Google Assistant sessions for Google I/O, Google Assistant stuff is very devicey. So what you find is a lot of the Google Assistant stuff got announced at CES in January. So there's a lot of sessions about Google Assistant, but what it kind of comes down to is Google Assistant in more places. Like literally everywhere. Like you name it, there's going to be a button everywhere for Google Assistant on all sorts of devices. So it's popping up kind of all over. And that's about it at this stage. Probably throw to questions. I'm sure you guys have got lots of questions. And don't forget, I/O is just about 13 days away. So not far, not long to wait.